I've heard neurodivergent people being called the canaries in the coal mine. And I think that's really true, that if there's a system that is toxic in some way to humans, a neurodivergent person will show the signs early. But when we lean into that and start bringing in compassion and understanding and calm, everyone benefits. Every human benefits, not just the canary.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Polaris Connection, connecting parents of autistic children with industry experts. Each week, we navigate the world of autism together, bringing you real conversations from specialists who truly get it. The journey is challenging, but you don't have to walk it alone. So get cozy, settle in, let's connect, and do some good. I am your host, Brad Broyles, and I'm here with my hyper-fixated Bluey prodigy, Nathan Palmer. How you doing?
You know what, Brad? I love Bluey. Hyperfixated. I'm going to have to fixate on for just a moment. But I think the reason we did that introduction is because we have gone global yet again.
Yes, sir.
And we have guests from none other than Australia. Am I right?
Our wonderful partners from Australia. Thank you so much for being here. We have two great guests, Tony Attwood and Dr. Michelle Garnett. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Nathan. I love the Bluey reference. Very proud of Bluey. Not that I know much about Bluey. You'll have to fill me in, Nathan, because I have teenage kids now. I'm not watching it, but it looks amazing.
It is such a wonderful show. It's so relatable on many levels. And it wasn't intended to be, I'm going to say, a neurodiverse featured show, but I will tell you, it has such a sense of safety and connection that it's just kind of become that. In fact, I was watching the show with the Whammies. What's it called? Pressure Luck, I think.
Oh, okay.
And one of the contestants was on the spectrum, and one of his personalized prizes was like a Bluey experience in Australia. So it's just a great program. Couldn't recommend it enough.
Right.
Okay, when you watch Bluey, the houses are Brisbane houses. So it's based on, so we want an idea of what it looks like where we are. It's the houses. But the scriptwriters for the series are very contemporary with the various issues, not just of families, but of society too. So it's a quality program.
Yeah.
Wow.
Agreed.
Wow. So I didn't know that. I love it. My kids watch it all the time. It is my favorite one is when they all dress up like old ladies and they run around and they try to.
I'll have to watch that one. Yes, it's very cute.
It is a great one.
Very
but
nice.
you know, Tony and Michelle, thank you for being here. You're international sensations, over 80 years of experience in the autism and research and being authors. We are so excited for what you can share and what your work is with our audience. So thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's a lovely welcome. We feel very appreciated and seen. Thank you. Wow.
So tell us a little bit more about your background. How did you guys get together? Why were you so interested? I know a little bit of your background, but I want our audience to hear it from you. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you guys connect and what you do for the autism community.
Wow,
okay.
that's a big
if
story.
we go historically, I think it would come from me because I was a 19-year-old, just done 1 year of psychology at university, went to a special school as a volunteer. That was in 1971, and met two autistic children there who were very different from the special needs group of kids. For example, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, where the differences were very conspicuous. These were two kids who looked like any other children, but they didn't seem to relate, think, perceive in the same way that I would expect children to do. So there was both a sense of compassion for the challenges they faced, but also a curiosity as to why these two children, non-speaking, were so different. So at the age of 19, I decided to pursue a career in autism. Now, at that time, autism was an expression of schizophrenia and psychosis, and probably caused by mums not loving their children, which was a terrible insult. Mm-hmm. So I then pursued a career. This was in England, and then went to Australia, and I was invited to give lectures at the local university on autism to the clinical psychology students. And in 1993, 92 or 3?
93.
93?
Yes.
Michelle will carry the story.
Oh, yes. So in 1993, thank you, Tony, I was a Master's of Clinical Psychology student here at the University of Queensland in Brisbane. Tony was a lecturer invitee to come in to talk about autism. And I just mind blown. I was like, wow, all of my education to date in psychology by then had been very much within a social learning frame. So I didn't know much about neuroscience, neurology, this whole way that the brain could relate, think, perceive, sense differently. It was just, I caught the autism bug massively. But a huge, huge factor was, if you've ever seen Tony present, he's a very charismatic, warm, compassionate teacher, presenter, and has a fine analysis knowledge of the area, keeps up to date with the research. So that was just so inspiring. It was like, oh my God, I want to be like that, and I want to know all about autism. So I was very lucky then to be able to get a placement with Tony, who was currently working in disability services here in Brisbane. And we just connected so well. We had a wonderful time. I learned so much. I loved my placement, and it became my special interest, I now realize, because I discovered only a few years ago now that I am autistic. And of course, that would explain a lot of my initial fascination. But at that stage, I didn't know. But just on us, that connection has been amazing. We've worked together for over 30 years. And we have had so much fun and been so productive. And I feel so proud of what we've been able to achieve together. Because I think one thing that really joins us is this deep empathy for autistic people and a passion to make life better for autistic people and their families. So, there's a lot in the 30 years, but that's kind of how it started.
Wow.
Well, and that's evident in your past. Sounds like you're the resident fans of, you adopted this view before it was the cool thing to do.
Can I emphasize that?
Yeah.
Because from the moment I met 2 autistic children, and I've met tens of thousands since then, they have all been my heroes, and they've taught me more than any lecturer or research study. It's basically observing and learning from autistic individuals. So a lot of what we do is actually taken from autism. And that's where I think it's been very successful. We don't use a preconceived conceptual model. It's basically observe what's going on, try and understand it from the autistic perspective, and then pass that on. So the 2 of us really are translators between the autism world and the non-autism world.
I love that perspective. And, I've been begging to ask you a question ever since you said 1970s, because it seems like the world of autism from a lay, third viewer perspective has changed radically, even just in the last 10 years, let alone the last 50 years. And I'm curious, do you think that's more a function of us being more aware as a community of that population, or is it a growing body of knowledge to show that there's more than we initially thought? What is your kind of view, as if you're keeping up, and it sounds like you're plugged in? How has that world changed in the years that you've been involved, if at all, or is it just we're getting a broader scope?
Okay, I think there are several factors. One is realize that autism isn't just the silent, aloof autistic child. This includes a child who is speaking, but we like them. Sometimes it's too loud.
But I speak a lot.
It's too much. And it can be somebody at university. It can be somebody who's married and a successful career. So we realize the breadth of autism. That's a big change. And so the problems have become much more of getting a job, relationships, and so on. There's also been a huge change in terms of the conceptualization, as the brain is wired differently. And the new approach is different, not defective. And it's a different way of perceiving, thinking, learning, and relating. And once you understand that, autism becomes incredibly logical. And so there's also a shift in terms of our understanding. So we have a greater knowledge of the breadth of autism, but also a lot of autistic behaviors are coping mechanisms that are abrasive to others, but they work for the autistic person.
You know, we go through that a lot. I mean, we have the saying, all behavior is communication. And I love that you referenced neuroscience, because so much of autism understanding used to be behavior-based, but the nervous system is its own system that functions differently than an intellectual system. And when you say coping mechanisms, who was it, Brad? Was it Dr. Barry Prezant was talking about being uniquely human? And we've referenced him a couple.
And how autism is just a form of communication. He argues that there's no such thing as autism; it's just behavior.
Well, we're all humans.
Yeah, we're all humans, and we're just.
But they express different.
We're just expressing it. Autism they just express it differently. The same behavior. Yeah.
The idea that, we might be at a football game, and Brad's a big football guy. I'm still trying to catch up.
I got to get into more to rugby, though. I got to do rugby stuff. So.
But at a game, if you're...
Your American game is for amateurs.
And,
I don't know. We might know.
The idea that when your team scores a touchdown, you jump up and you raise your hands and you scream and you get all excitable. Well, another person might be that excitable, but for a lesser inducing cause. It's not that the behaviors are any different, but the reason why they do it in the setting may factor. And so that idea of connecting, that we're really more alike than different.
Yeah, I mean, autism is not an alternative species.
No. Right? That's why sometimes the references seem a little off to me, like being an alien. I think you can feel like an alien in the classroom because everyone else has the social code, the dominant one, and you don't. And that's hard. But I think the human variation idea that is now wonderfully, I think, permeating the autism community, the neurodivergent community at large, actually, that we're all human. There's just wonderful, diverse ways of being human. Yeah. And that means that we need to work a little harder to understand a certain social code, or if you don't have language, behavior, and including body language, etc. But we can do that. And then, as Tony said, it becomes a lot easier on everyone. And it's easier to read the person. It's easier to feel, oh, this is logical. It makes sense. It's not so alien. It's human. It's like me. It's relatable. And then we get compassion and connection. And, of course, then humans thrive with those two. So I was just wanting to say as well, I was so inspired to meet Tony because this current message from the neurodiversity affirming movement is very much, it's been Tony's message for 50 years. So that's what made him stand out to me, that it's this neuroscience, but it's also with such love and compassion. There's such a welcome to this only different way of being.
Well, and I'm curious, and this is more for you, Tony. I had a question for you. I watched your videos and I watched a lot of what you guys are doing, and you said something that I was just I kind of understood, but I didn't understand. Now, you were late being diagnosed with autism, and you mentioned that when you were diagnosed, that you said something to her, I fit the profile, but not the disability. You said something like that. And I was kind of curious, what does that mean that, hey, I fit the profile, but not the disability?
Okay, in a way, the characteristics are there and always been there, but I've been able to use them constructively and compensate for some of the other features too. So the characteristics of autism are part of my profile, but I don't need psychiatric support, medication. I certainly don't need support in employment because I should be retired.
Well, isn't that what Michelle's doing? She's your support, right?
We support each other in a huge way.
Okay, there's a certain bond and effectiveness that Michelle and I have, and I'm so enjoying it. I can't say farewell to that because it means that I can continue, because autism has been my identity, my career, and I'm exploring so much of it. So there are characteristics of autism in my family, my son and grandchildren, and across and between generations. And I think that is why I always understood autism, because I think my brain was pre-wired for autism. And so it wasn't a surprise when I met autistic individuals. And it's a question of, I understand, I get it. And that's what has been a great advantage in my career, is I can actually see the world from the autistic point of view and pass that on and find out what would be useful. So it is a wonderful combination.
We could kind of call them the autism code talkers.
Yeah, you are the code talkers.
And how lucky to have those where your superpower is the fixation on that field. I mean, and no wonder you provided such a plethora of resources. And for those that do any level of research on you, you guys have so many events and instructional webinars and series that just the insights you bring to this field have been incredible.
Thank you, Nathan. I wanted to say as well, it's now the case that only in the last 5 years that people are embracing self-diagnosis. And I think there has been a confusion within the neuro-affirming world that actually if you're self-diagnosed, that, is this okay? What does this mean? And positive identity of autism, how can that be? Isn't it a disability? But I think it's really important to embrace both, that you can be autistic and be disabled, particularly in certain contexts that can't include you. There's no access there. And you can be disabled by conditions that can come along with autism. Like, it's very difficult to be autistic and not have fluent speech or also have significant learning difficulties. But we know that if you have autism pure, that is no comorbidities, no occurring conditions, that doesn't predict disability. It's interesting. The disability seems to come with what we call autism plus, the mental health issues and the ones that I mentioned before. So it was interesting before this current era, neurodiversity affirming movement, we would often see adults in our practice for diagnostic assessment saying, I think that back then it would be probably Asperger's syndrome. What does this mean? And we could say, yeah, you're Aspie, welcome to the club. And this doesn't represent a disability for you, it's a profile. And we even called it a personality profile for a while because it didn't fit in the current definitions of disability. These are adults who are pediatricians, accountants, artists. They're not looking for services and funding because they are independent and thriving in the community, but they've always noticed there's something different about themselves and they've had to work that out.
And I like it's about understanding yourself better,
Yeah.
It is. I'm just a thought here. There are three major individuals who first described autism. Eva Sachareva, Russian, 1925, Hans Asperger and Leo Kanner. And they described groups of kids that they saw who had a particular pattern. In their descriptions, what was fascinating, all three described talents and abilities. Hans Asperger, an astronomer. Eva Sachareva talked about certain individuals and the qualities they have for potential career and so on. Leo Kanner also did that and saying that there is the mathematics abilities and so on. And yet the DSM has no mention of the qualities. In fact, you might as well hang yourself when you read it.
It's all there.
It is so bad.
Depressing.
And it's missed the essence of the three original observers. There's no mention of the talents. It's just a list of should we say, disorders and deficits.
I thank you so much for pointing that out. One of the major shifts we did from an academic perspective, and I think we mentioned before the show, this Polaris Connection was born out of our school for autistic kids, the Polaris Academy. We have a feature here in the United States called the IEP, which is an individualized education plan, and there's different acronyms in different countries, but the problem I had with them historically is they focus traditionally on deficiencies and accommodations for the deficiencies. And a shift we've intentionally made is identification of those strengths and developing accommodations and goals for the proficiencies, which I think is just a missed point in a lot of special needs education. And I love that you point out they really all do have their, you call them the superpower, Brad?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's so fun discovering what those are.
It is.
Well, and we like to call it the Talent Discovery Center.
Yeah.
You know, like what is your talent? You know.
Yeah. I have contacts with various people over the world, and I said somewhere that I'd love someone to do a research study of the number of Nobel Prize winners who could have been autistic. And lo and behold, somebody's actually done that and sent me their review of 100 Nobel Prize winners. 80% of them had autistic characteristics.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Interesting. Now, I hope you don't mind if I take a little tangent, because in doing research with you, and bear in mind on this show, we've had a number of professionals across different disciplines, and we've kind of done a deep dive into some of these sub-profiles and just characteristics like PDA and some of the comorbidities that you described that go along with your autism plus. There's one that you guys touch on that I don't think we've ever explored on the show, and I wonder if you could comment on it, because as I read it, I see how this could apply to at least a lot of the families that I've dealt with, and it was called rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
Yes.
Yeah,
Told
it is.
you.
Okay, so RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
RSD.
I can read some of the features that at least I found on your materials, but if you guys wouldn't mind, and I think you even have a webinar coming up on it soon.
Well, and before you begin, the reason why I pointed to our producer, Jesse, because him and I were talking about this before you even asked this question.
Perfect.
Because I didn't quite understand this either.
So,
okay. Yeah, what are your questions? We're really...
Okay. Well, let me just do this. Here are some of the symptoms to just pique curiosity, and I'd love if you could just explain to our audience what this thing is, because it was new to me when I heard it. But some of the signs are high levels of anxiety, low self-esteem, difficulty maintaining relationships, rumination and perseveration, negative self-talk, isolation, sudden and emotional outbursts for failure, withdrawing from social, like all these things I'm seeing part and parcel. But what makes rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which I'm guessing it is what it sounds like, a fear or reaction to rejection or failure, what separates that from just a regular autistic tendency? Why the sub-profile?
Yeah, I can see why you asked the question. Thank you for framing it so well, Nathan, because what you just described in the list of what can come along with RSD is actually the emotional sequelae, which we see in autism anyway and can be caused by many things, including RSD. But what RSD is, or rejection sensitivity dysphoria, it is what it sounds like, as you described, but it's actually even fear of perceived criticism. So the sensitivity, the kind of emotional antenna for being rejected or criticized or judged in any way is so finely tuned, so acute, that even the tiniest little ambiguous social cue, like a twitch in a face or a movement of the eyes to look at something else, can be interpreted as being a rejection. So there's this sensitivity that goes beyond what most of us experience of, well, I don't like criticism either. What's the big deal? And then the other part of it is the sensitivity in terms of the antenna, but the other part is when the person is feeling rejected and it's a big hit, the sequelae of that emotionally lasts a long time. So we've had people describe, for example, their sons and daughters still ruminating on a rejection that occurred 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they're still stuck in their bedroom and can't move out and can't, relate to other people. They've disconnected because they're so frightened of being rejected again. We've also, that's an extreme example, but as another one, but still extreme, going to work and getting some feedback that is gutting, like, oh, you think I'm a failure, you think I've been rejected. It's triggered. Then not being able to go to work for 2 days, just feeling physical symptoms, emotional symptoms. I just can't face it. I cannot go out there. And the reason that we think, because RSD currently, by the way, is not it's a clinical term in the sense clinicians have started to use it, but it's not a formal diagnosis. It's not in any texts, and it's only a fairly new phenomenon. I'm not surprised you haven't heard about it a lot. And the last 5 years or so, the autistic community online, and particularly the ADHD community as well, have taken this term and run with it because it resonates so deeply. And it's actually coming out of a psychiatrist 5 years ago who published a paper on it in the context of ADHD. So it's actually studied more at the moment in the context of ADHD than autism. But as you know, those neurotypes come together a lot.
Yeah. Okay. If you go through a typical autistic ADHD person's day as a child, no, you're stupid. No, not that way. Rolling of the eyes, the criticism, you're not good enough. But also in autism, you've got extraordinary sensitivity to negative mood in other people. It's actually almost like an electric shock when you disappoint others. So any negative feeling in others, you pick up very quickly. Any disappointment that you haven't succeeded. So what happens is there's a relative poverty of compliments, but a huge number of criticisms throughout the day. So the mindset has come to anticipate criticism, which has been death by 1,000 cuts, 1,000 or more opportunities of, should we say, encouragement has been more of rejection. You're not good enough. And that you're not good enough, you're not one of us, is going to affect the schema of the individual themselves. So there's almost a phobia for any form of rejection.
Yeah. Wow, see, and I thought I was just afraid of my wife saying no when I asked her to marry me, but I think we can all relate with these big rejection fears. But what you're describing is these patterns of micro rejections, and taking a look at our language. Is our language too critical, or is our language conveying consistent failures? You know, sometimes as adults, we tend to think that we're motivating our children by pointing out the ways they messed up so they can do better. And you're suggesting that might actually be reinforcing this fear of continued rejection. And maybe the pattern is, let's find a way. And there's always a way to, I think, give a positive spin.
Oh, yeah.
And giving reinforcing language so that we're not shutting them down.
Well, I think what you describe, can I just say what you describe, I think, is a really important piece to it, that being aware that RSD is really relatable for many autistic and ADHD adults means that, yes, as teachers, therapists, parents, we can rethink how we're motivating our kids, how we're talking to them, how we need to give them positive feedback a lot more when they're neurodivergent than when they're not. You know, we need to be very affirming. Errorless learning works so much better than pointing out the errors, for example. But I think as well, it's an important piece to hold is that when you have repeated multiple small cuts, as Tony's describing, what can occur is a kind of trauma. So what's happening there is a trauma, as in like a complex trauma where the person's lost trust in others. And so for some with RSD, a trauma lens can be very helpful. So it's certainly adjusting environments, but it's also about healing for that person. It can be very healing to get the trauma healed through therapy, to be able to have that relinquish. You're free again. You're not so locked up with fears about, I'm going to be judged. I'm going to have a horrible few days just because of one thing that happens. Because the thing about RSD is that the person can see that it's irrational. They go, my reaction's way over the top to what it was, but they can't not feel it, and they can't not be, they're still discombobulated by it. So trauma is part of a picture often.
Well, so there was a lot that was said in the last 10 minutes, and I want to just go back to make sure I understand everything, because this is brand new to me, and just for our audience understand.
Give you a test on it. You're going to have to write a multiple choice exam.
Yes. But we're not going to tell you if you get bad.
I know, exactly. I'm already going through trauma right now. My high school days are coming back.
No, and if you make any mistakes, we're going to be very critical of you.
Man, okay, that's just my daily life being around Nathan. I'm just playing. So just so I understand the RSD, because there was two things, and I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, because this is brand new to me, and I wanted to talk to you about this as well. So Michelle, you talked a little bit about the length of rejection or criticism, like something that, hey, somebody experienced 6 years ago that they're still stewing over, they can't really get over it. And then Tony, you also talked about as a phobia as something that could be anticipated throughout the day. That, hey, these are, like you talked about, 1,000 cuts. Like as I go out throughout the day, I'm worried about these type of criticisms or rejections. And then we jumped into trauma that happened long time ago or maybe recent. So I guess I love the antenna. Am I getting RSD correctly defined? Does that sound about right?
You are 100% correct so far.
No criticisms here.
Yeah. So I find this fascinating. Now this subcategory with ADHD or with autism, is that mostly found in Australia? Do you see that in Europe? Or is that coming here to the United States? Because I haven't heard this before until I talked to you guys. Where do you see the growth, or I guess the acceptance of this type of subclassification?
Well, the as I say, 5 years, it's only very recent. So I immediately go to, well, where's the research coming out of? And it's across US, UK, Australia. And it's also global. Well, for me, it feels like a global phenomenon because it's so much online. And the online autism communities, as you know, is global as well. But I would say it's definitely got traction here in Australia and in the UK. But I'm not as sure about the US. I don't know how much. I'm not involved in any online groups there. I don't know.
This actually illustrates a new dimension of autism, and that is autism support groups. And the origins of this really came from the support groups. There was a psychiatrist that 5 years ago first described it. He was a specialist in ADHD, but it was the support groups for autism and ADHD who resonated with this and said, yes, yes, yes. And so the momentum is coming from, we use the new term, ADHD, the combination of autism and ADHD. It's coming from autistic individuals, not an academic model. It's coming from autistic people themselves. They say, yes, this describes how I feel.
Well, and I love your background. I love that you have multidiscipline experience. And we've said this before, the clinical psychology approach to autism is a support that sometimes, at least in the US model, gets overlooked because we get this diagnosis and the tendency is to go to what are the specific therapies for autism. And so we see speech therapy and occupational therapy and, behavior ABA therapy. And we don't always go the clinical route, but what are the psychological profiles that maybe are that are separate from those clinical directives? You mentioned the term trauma. We've talked about it on the show before, but I want to just touch on that layer a little bit because it's something that needs its time in the sun. Trauma response and trauma layers as it relates to the nervous system is a piece that sometimes can be frustrating if you don't know what to look for.
Absolutely.
I'd love if you could speak a little bit on that. My understanding with trauma is it drives this nervous system response that the trauma is attached to, that irrespective of your clinical approach or your therapy approach, if someone is in a trauma-induced state, whether because of their fear of rejection or a response to demand in a PDA subprofile or any other trigger, there's really not a whole lot you can do until you deal with the trauma. So what are some strategies if we see trauma or these traumatic nervous system responses? How do we know how to cope or how to coach through those?
That is such a good question. The current way that we're doing that in Australia, from a clinical psychology point of view, is we're really starting to educate teachers and parents about what a shutdown looks like, what a meltdown looks like, and the fight, flight, and freeze and fawn responses. And when you see those, it really depends whether you're looking at a meltdown or, you have the escape artists who run away, or is it a shutdown, which looks like numbness and kind of a mutism, situational mutism. So determining initially what autonomic state the person may be in. And then, of course, we're dealing with fear. So when it's fear, it's about co-regulation. How do I now show up for this person in a way that's going to help them feel safe? So it's really tuning into, and we're all animals. We sense each other's experience, each other's distress, pain, etc. And we're reading that. And so the, I guess, rule number one in that management is to start doing whatever you do to self-regulate, to ensure your nervous system is going to be present, grounded, and calm to be able to reach out and help that person, if it's a child or an adult, feel safe. And with autism, it tends to be one-on-one. The crowds feel dangerous. So one-on-one, and really just moving into, we've called it energy management. We look at it as like autonomic states, as in Deb Dana's polyvagal ladder, moving from sympathetic nervous system responses or freeze, reptilian core kind of responses up towards social brain. And so we're really needing to go very quiet, use less words. There's not going to be as much understanding. We're using a calm voice, and we're asking the person to sit down. We're being there for them in a way that's non-demanding and also not threatening any consequences. This is not about behavior. This is not about timeout.
It's not about tests that we were going to give me, right?
It's not about tests you're going to get later. No, it's all about how do we, what does this little person or big person need right now? And often we find that when we talk about those shutdowns, meltdowns, freezes later, the person can often tell us what they need. And usually what they say, there's a lot of very common themes. And one is, don't go away, I want you there, but don't come too close, don't touch me, don't tell me what to do, just be there. There's a presence, but it's a calm presence. It's not escalating in any way. There's no demand.
There's also 3 trauma sources for autistic individuals in particular. One is bullying and teasing, which can be horrendous. It can be relentless and affect self-esteem and so on. So you have trauma from specific incidents, but also trauma from sensory experiences, which are painful and unavoidable. And people will say, just get used to it. But you can't. Repeated exposure doesn't reduce it. So every day you're going to have multiple pain responses to everyday sensory experiences. The third one is invalidation trauma. And the invalidation is not believing, well, if you haven't got any friends, just try harder. If you don't like the sound of that dog, just ignore it. And so that invalidation is traumatic because each time they communicate their problems, they're often dismissed because the person they're talking to often doesn't understand or know how to help them.
And that's a great insight because, I think if any neurotypical person, and, the more and more I study neurodiversity, I'm convinced we're all just neurodiverse in our own way. But if any quote unquote normal person was if anyone was given consistent reminders through the day of how wrong they were doing it or how different they were, it would eat at anybody. And even in relationship dynamics, when we talk about how we communicate with our spouses, all these little micro criticisms that we talk about, it comes across in nuanced ways, but we all struggle with it. And I think having some compassion and empathy for realizing that just the day-to-day normal experience of a neurodiverse individual invites these micro rejections, right? Just because they're living diversity, they're living I'm not like you. I think the invite to the rest of the world is consider intentionally introducing compassion and empathy in your dialogue. Consider a positive approach to how you speak to others, neurodiverse or not, right? I think just that mentality makes us all better people, and it softens the environment for those that have no choice but to be exposed to it.
I really love that. It's so insightful and so wise. And I think that's the basis of neuro-inclusive schools and neuro-inclusive communities. Because, of course, as well as autism, we're not just born autistic or ADHD or whatever else the neurodivergence is. There's then life, and life itself throws up things, as you say. Everyone's suffering in their own way at different times, and we don't know what that is, whether it is, a trauma from their childhood that's still playing out in their lives now, like physical assault or sexual abuse or rape, and the figures for all the traumas are high. And so it's neurodivergent people, and it's stuff that happens to anyone in life, grief, poverty, and then there's all the other ways that you can be marginalized in our community in terms of ethnicity, cultural difference, gender difference, and sexuality preference. So there's a whole range of ways that I think when we bring that beautiful capacity we all have as humans, that empathy, compassion, and kindness into our daily interactions with people, responses change. We see the person more clearly. We start to understand. We can tune in more easily, and that's a key message, I think, for humans generally. But I've heard neurodivergent people being called the canaries in the coal mine. And I think that's really true, that if there's a system that is toxic in some way to humans, a neurodivergent person will show the signs early. But when we lean into that and start bringing in compassion and understanding and calm, everyone benefits. Every human benefits, not just the canary, everyone. The canary will start to show more calm. The challenging behavior, whatever people want to call it, will not be as evident. That person will feel safe. It makes a huge difference. So thank you. I really love what you said, Nathan.
Wow.
Well, thank you guys for what you bring to the dialogue. You know, there's so many, I think, more topics, Brad, we could have gone into.
This is an episode that I'm going to listen over and over again. I can already tell. So,
it's like eating chocolate cake.
You love the chocolate.
I know, and that's going to bring my own little different kind of phobia too, because I probably shouldn't. But You're such a great team. We love what you bring. Tell us a little bit more about maybe events, or like our audience. I'm sure they want to know more. Tell us some work that you both are doing, some events that are coming up that we need to put on our calendar.
Okay, this is now the commercial break. There is on the web, if you go to Attwood and Garnett events.com. First of all, there's a whole load of blogs that you can download. There are also a series of free webcasts in a variety of areas. But every month, we have a webcast on a particular topic. This month, it's going to be unmasking and rejection sensitivity disorder.
Oh, there we go.
The next month is going to be anxiety. The following month is going to be...
I think it's PDA.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
it's
there
PDA.
we go.
But it's PDA, and particularly on PDA in adults and the difficulties they face in their adult life.
And that's one half day. And the other half day that I'm taking the lead on is on children and teens. Because we do have an on-demand library with PDA and intro and PDA going deeper. But we've decided, you know what? It's really important to get nuanced about the age, the needs for different ages. So we're just going to go a little bit deeper into that. But actually our next two events are this week on Friday, Australia time. So it's really exciting. We're nearly there. So
okay. And of course, there's going to be a time difference. But you can register and have the webcast on demand.
Yes.
And you can watch it in your own time with whoever you want to watch it and absorb it. Pause it. I was going to say, make a cup of tea. In America,
some coffee.
Have some coffee and then come back to it.
Yeah, I think it's 60 days that you can have it afterwards, because people appreciate that, especially when it's a full day. It's quite a lot of information to take in one day, as you can imagine. Yeah, but thank you for affirming our work. We're very excited to share ideas and loved talking to you guys today. We really appreciate being asked on. Thank you.
No problem. And hopefully you'd be willing to come back at some point, because, again, there's topics like I was going to go into your book on autism in women, which is a whole different analysis and conversation and, expression in teens. Like I don't think there's any topic we could deep dive that they wouldn't be able to contribute.
I know. And especially since Tony got very excited with the test at the end, I'll be ready next time, man. We're going to do it.
Okay. These are the questions. Multiple choice. Autism is a sign of stupidity. No. False. Autism is a sign of difference. Yes.
I think they may get that one.
I think they may get that one.
There we go.
We do. And to that, it's okay, I think, to recognize there's a difference, but I think the harmony comes in finding how we're the same. And what I mean by that is we all are affected by things in different ways. If we look at the autism, and I don't want to say they're overly delicate, but to your point, the canary in the coal mine, if they're giving us feedback, we might want to reconsider, can I have more compassion? Can I have more empathy? Should I come to this with more curiosity? And if we've done nothing else than to just give a framework of other ways that we can, again, avoid rejection, which isn't healthy in any form, but just be conscious that there's factors at play beyond just a condition that anybody could have. The trauma and neuroscience and just nervous system are things we all grapple with. And if learning about these topics makes us ability to communicate better to even a subprofile, it makes us better to communicate with all profiles.
Well, and before we leave, I'm sorry, I have a question that if I don't ask it now, I'm going to be stewing about it for the next month.
You better ask it.
This RSD. So when I see someone that, if I identify a subcategory or a subprofile of an RSD, somebody that's experiencing very sensitive trauma or sensitive of rejection, I know we talked about being present, but what things can I do to help them, I guess, cope or regulate? How, as a professional or as a human, what are some tips that I should be doing?
Yeah, I think one of the first ones is reassurance, it's not rejection. This can be sending off an email and there's a delay in replying, and the person then fills in the gap with all sorts of, this is rejecting me, they're never going to talk. There's a tendency to catastrophize. So one of the things they need is information and reassurance. The second one, in a way, is this is driven by anxiety, and you need to focus on the anxiety, not what they're worried about. So it's breathing, calming, etc. Once they calm down, then they can be reasonable and understand the reality of the situation. So reassurance, anxiety reduction.
I would say the very first start is, I totally agree with Tony, and the very first start is for us, you as a human, me as a human, is to I try and ground, take that deep breath and just feel present. I would call it accessing my wise mind, or my self with a capital S, my observer. I just want to step into being as present as possible to this person, because everyone's different and I don't know what the needs are going to be. So I want to be acutely aware, and then to offer validation for the distress. I think often when we validate someone, we think we have to agree with them and say, oh, yeah, you were definitely rejected there. God, I would feel mad too. It's not like that. We don't have to agree. We don't know. Maybe the rejection was real. I don't know. It's often perceived rejection, as Tony said, but it could be real. So I would be wanting to really validate the distress and say, wow, I can really hear that you're upset right now. Do you want to just take a moment together? Let's just talk about it. Or do you want to just sit here for a while and just connect? Because once we connect, that's going to help that autonomic nervous system come right down. Because all of the research on trauma shows that support, connection is the healing. So when we can be there for another person in a very profound way, our true presence, that's the gift. That's how we can connect. Once the connection's there, you're going to have so much room to explore how real that rejection was, offering maybe a different perspective on it, or talk about other options for that person if they want to talk about this regularly with you, or is there anything I can do differently as your teacher, partner, mother, etc. But I think the first is connect first. And that's connect here first. You can't see me if you're listening, but it's the ground. It's into the body as well as the mind. We're all connected. The way I think of it is the three pillars of our thinking, feeling, and body. And when we can be in all of those, we have access to our intuition and our mind. Intuition, heart, and mind. So this is what we want to come from. And then that connection is possible. We all know how to do that because we're human and it is our essence. So we're connecting to essence. We want that person to connect to essence because then they're out of trauma and out of RSD.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you there, Michelle.
I know. I think we all experience that we've gone over all of our rejections at that moment. Michelle, thank you. We were all better because of you. That was beautiful.
I feel better just having listened to it.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
And what a connection. You're in Australia. We're here in America, and I feel so much better. Thank you so much.
Oh, gosh, I'm getting goosebumps and feeling a bit teary. Thank you. I feel so connected to you as well, Brad, and you, Nathan. Thank you so much for that feedback. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for making us part of your day. For those who are listening, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss a conversation that inspires connection. Want to thank Jesse Palmer for being part of our staff, Dallin Davis for a wonderful job as our marketing director. Until next time, let's go do some good.